right, spring forward, fall back, the contentious history of daylight saving time. Let's get going here. So, Egyptian sundial. This one is from 13th century BC. I don't know why all my gallery talks seem to start in Egypt, but they do, but it's wild. But the first timekeeping device was a sundial. And why I like this picture, it's actually one of the oldest sundials that's shown, but if you count the wedges, there are 12 of them. Now, what is interesting is Egyptians used a base 12 numbering system, and that's why they think we have 24 hours in a day, 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds, right? It's base 12. During the French Revolution, those revolting French tried to use a base 10 number system. They divided days into 10 hours with each 100 minutes. There were 10 days in a week. Unfortunately, the workers revolted because they couldn't stand working 9 days consecutively. And it also meant replacing the clocks, and it lasted about 2 years. But if you've got a boring afternoon and you want to mess around on your computer some Saturday afternoon, look for base 10 French Revolution clocks. It is fascinating. They were making beautiful timepieces. And another one of the things that they didn't like was they had to replace all their clocks. Okay? Anyway, a sundial's great, but what about nighttime? Well, it's called a clepsydra, and it's a water clock, and it works really well at night. This is an Egyptian one, and if you can see, it has holes in it, and the water drips out, and they can tell time at night. Interesting? So why were the ancients so interested in time? Most of it was for religious rituals, right? Just as a little side note, I'm into side notes. This is the Chinese clepsydra. A water clock, and it's from about 1077. Interestingly, its precision is within 14.4 seconds. Can you imagine that? Problem with water clocks, they don't work when it's really, really cold. This is a Salisbury Cathedral clock. I took this picture. I was there. It's really cool. It's in the Salisbury Cathedral in England. It's from about 1386, and it's thought to be the oldest working clock. Now, it wasn't continuous, but it's actually still working now. It's really cool. The first mechanical clocks were being made around 1270, 1230 in northern Italy, southern Germany. They didn't have dials or hands. They just struck bells. So interesting, the word clock in English comes from the Latin clocca, meaning bell. I love when I get an oh. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So the bells would ring. These will ring every hour, but the bells will ring at 6 a.m., 12 noon, and 6 p.m. for the Angelus. That was very typical. Would be a Marian prayer. In monastic rules, they had 7 times a day that they would pray, including matins at 2 a.m. So during the night, they'd have to wake up. Even in Buddhism, bell sound is calming and it is for inducing meditation. Okay? So we need to talk about what's called local time or sun time. Transportation was slow. You walked every place. Fast transportation might be a horse, but still, that isn't really fast compared to, say, today. So local time was set by the local clock. Could be the town square. It could be just something. But it could even be a sundial. But they would put noon at exactly 12 o'clock when the sun reached the highest point, okay? And every town would have a different local time. In the early 1880s, it was thought that there were at least 144 different time zones in North America. 144. I just put this one in. This town clock is in Winsboro, South Carolina, population 3,100. It was put in around 1837, and it's supposed to be the most continuously running clock in the United States. The bell would sound on butchering days to let people know that the fresh meat was available, but it also would sound as an alarm for fires, danger, curfew, and special announcements. And you see residuals of that. Think about in in Elkhart, the clock on the city plaza, right? That's kind of where this tradition comes from. And I think Elkhart, I have heard the 12 noon siren each Saturday, which it's the weather siren. So that tradition has held. Okay, so how do you tell time if you're traveling someplace and you want to know what the local time is? And there's 144 time zones. Well, to help navigate, some enterprising person came up with a diagram exhibiting the difference between places shown. And in the center here is Washington, D.C., and then radiating out is the different cities, right? Got that? Wouldn't this make this easy? Yeah, let's try a little different approach. Basically, it's the same thing, but it's from a travel guide. Now, if you can see this top line, it's saying noon at Washington, D.C. So it's telling you the same information. And just reading that top line, Albany, New York, 12:14 p.m. Indianapolis, Indiana, 11:26 a.m. Philadelphia, 12:08 p.m. We're not kidding. I mean, it's just all over the place. So what brought standardized time? The railroads. The railroads, right. Okay, so Great Britain was actually the first to standardize. Now, Great Britain used a fixed time standard in 1844 ocean-going vessels because Britain had 75% of the world's sea trade. So by 1844, most of the cities and towns had switched to what they called London time. We would now call it Greenwich Mean Time, okay, but it's the same thing. And by 1847, most of the railroads were using London time. And you can see the railroads are really bursting. This is 1840, 30 years later. There's a lot of railroads going through. But the thing about putting it in Great Britain or England, it's an island. It doesn't connect to anything else. And just for comparison, it's about the size of Michigan. Okay, so if you think about it, it's small, it's compact, it's much easier to regulate the time, so everybody was on Greenwich Mean Time. It's not like the United States where it's going from sea to shining sea, right? So in 1870, this is the railroad map. The transcontinental here was finished in 1869. The problem is the schedules are still using localized time, but it's the time based on where they're headquartered. So say a railroad is based in Baltimore, but it's out in Iowa too. It's going by Baltimore time, even though it's not even the same state. It is chaotic. It is nuts, okay? There's 300 local time zones. The timetable's rarely coordinated between different railroads. On top of that, unlike now where we have multiple rails side by side or we have side rails, you've got single rails. It's dangerous. There's starting to be train accidents. It's just not working. So finally, 1883, it was proposed by William Allen that we needed time zones. It was implemented by the General Time Convention, which was a group of railroad managers from US and Canada. So it was both countries working together. And his proposal there were 4 time zones, and it would be the same ones we have today: Eastern, Central. Indiana's in Central. Mountain and Pacific. Interestingly, of course, Canada goes a little further west than the United States, and so they actually had a 5th time zone out here, and it was called intercolonial. Intercolonial, which I think is a weird name, but it's been changed to Atlantic, and you would know it as the Atlantic time zone. So here's the proposed railroad standard time. Red is Eastern, Central, Mountain, and Pacific, okay? Which would lead to the day of 2 noons, which was November 18, 1883. Basically, US and Canada Railroad synchronized all the railroad clocks to a standard time. So at noon local time, it was changed to noon railroad time, which is to say one of these time zones. Got that? And it was called the Day of Two Noons because it changed at noon, and therefore some areas would have experienced two noons, okay? So this was the first true standardization of times, okay? In 1884, President Arthur Chester thought he needed to seize the moment, ba-dum-boom, and he called forth in Washington, D.C., the 1884 International Meridian Conference, okay? He had 41 delegates from 26 different nations, and they established that the prime meridian would be right here in England. North America and Sweden had actually already aligned their clocks with Greenwich Mean Time, and Europe would follow about 10 years later, okay? So these are the time zones in 1913. There still was no standardization. They were still kind of going by railroad time, and Indiana's still on Central. But notice Florida's on Central. Wow, yeah, I think it's really weird. And then this line comes down. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. So that's 1913. So these are the time zones in this year: Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific, and of course we've added Alaska and Hawaiian Aleutian out here. So we actually range quite a lot of things. Although interestingly, Arizona, it stays on standard time, but the Navajo Nation, which is in Arizona, doesn't. So Arizona does have two time zones, okay? But we're supposed to be talking about daylight standard time, Gesundheit. So let's get on with this. Our good old friend Benjamin Franklin. He was a character, we all know that. And by the way, I don't know if you heard me say my font is Poor Richard, just in honor of Ben. It really is. Anyway, he was an American diplomat living in Paris in 1784. He was negotiating post-Revolutionary War trade agreements with European countries. Paris was known for late city, and he was known that he enjoyed his evening recreations. So one day he went to bed and got up the next morning and wait, where's this light coming from? And he realized that he hadn't closed the shutters in his bedroom, and it was light out, and it was like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and it's bright out. Wow, who knew? He shut the shutters and went back to bed. But thinking about this, he wrote an essay, a satirical essay. It was printed in April 1784, proposing that they should change their sleeping habits or their sleeping schedules to save on candles, right? So it was an economic proposition. Now, it's considered satirical, right? Tongue-in-cheek, typical Franklin. But when I think about it, I listen to comedians sometimes. George Carlin's the one that always comes to mind. He would say, he would make a joke, we'd all laugh and then think, he's right, And I think that's kind of what was going on here. Over 100 years later, it was seriously actually proposed by a man named George Hudson. He was an entomologist in New Zealand, and he wanted more time to play with his bugs, I guess. And in 1895, he proposed a 2-hour shift in time during the summer, 2-hour. Okay, so whether you like daylight saving time or not, this is the man to blame. Okay, this is your guy. His name is William Willett. He wrote a pamphlet in 1907 advocating advancing in summer hours by 80 minutes. 80 minutes. And he said 20 minutes on 4 consecutive Sundays in April, and then reverse it on 4 consecutive Sundays in September. And his main thing was to increase evening light, evening activity. He didn't make quite such an economic argument, but it was mentioned. So it still doesn't kind of go anyplace until World War I, Germany. Okay, it first started in Germany. It was to save energy, to conserve coal, and started, ironically, in Germany. England, it was to save coal mostly. In England, they would adopt it only a couple weeks later. Between 1916 and 1917, 25 more nations would actually go on to daylight saving time for energy conservation. Finally, 1918, U.S. decided they needed to do it too. So it was the Standard Time Act of 1918. And basically, this is an amazingly confusing graphic, but this is what they were using to advertise it. This was their sales pitch. Daylight saving plan will give you an extra hour to enjoy sunshine and plant war gardens. When you set clocks ahead an hour on April 1, your work hours will remain the same, but your play hours will increase, and the day will mean more to you. Uncle Sam will push his official clock forward by 60 minutes on April 1. There's an ironic date. Therefore, it is going to be unpatriotic for anyone to lie in a bed in mourning, right? Okay, got that? Okay, the way to interpret this puppy is that's 12 midnight, that's 1 a.m., and that's how the hours are shifting, so you're getting 1 extra hour of play every day. Got it? Okay. So this was how they were advertising. Woodrow Wilson signed the Standard Time Act of 1918 into law on March 19, 1918, to reduce fuel consumption for artificial lighting. It established daylight saving to start March 31 and last to October 27. Okay, farmers hated it, okay? And the thing was, most of the rural areas didn't even have electricity, okay? So they were mad. The National Grange called it a rising threat to agrarian values and an intrusion by city slickers demanding that everyone adjust to decadent lifestyles. I'm not making this up, this is one. It actually only lasted one season. Congress repealed it, but officially retained the time zones permanently, but daylight saving time was taken away. Interestingly, United Cigar Stores led the campaign for this, but a day longer for the man with the gun and the man with the hoe, isn't it? Okay, when did it come back? World War II. And it was called wartime at this. So it was implemented year-round daylight saving time to conserve energy for the war effort. It would go on for 3 years, February 942 to September 3045, okay? The primary goal was to save energy, maximize industrial production, and increase daylight hours for the workforce. Roosevelt signed it in January 1942. Okay. It was also, the time zones were called Eastern War Time, Central War Time, okay? But it would go on for 3 years. Post 1945, post-war, Time magazine called it chaos. They were right. There were no federal rules. And so states, municipalities could actually start their own daylight saving time when they wanted to and end it when they wanted to. They didn't have to do it. They might have. And they called it a hodgepodge of local time zones. So here's some examples. You can't make this stuff up. In 1962, Iowa had 23 different combinations of start and stop for daylight saving time. 23 just in Iowa. Illinois had 27 different time zones. An hour bus ride from Steubenville, Ohio to Moundsville, West Virginia, 35 miles. 35 miles. The local time would change 7 times. 35 miles. Okay, so if you were trying to keep up, you'd change your clock 7 times. This is the best one. This is incredulous. An 18-story building in St. Paul, Minnesota, 18-story building in St. Paul, Minnesota. 9 floors of city employees observed daylight saving time. 9 floors of county employees did not. There were 2 time zones in one building. Something had to give. Something had to give. And that give was called the Uniform Time Act of 1966. It was a federal law enacted to simplify and standardize observance of daylight saving time in the United States. It mandated that daylight saving time begin at 2 a.m., got that 2 a.m. on the last Sunday in April and end at 2 a.m. on the last Sunday in October. Okay, but states could exempt out, okay? So who opted out? Arizona, Hawaii, Indiana, and Michigan. Did you know that? But Michigan opted back in after a year. So the 3 states opted out. Okay, why 2 a.m.? Why 2 a.m.? Well, we go back to the railroads, right? There were no trains on the tracks at 2 a.m. on a Sunday in New York. I'm not making this stuff up, guys. You know? Okay, this one's a little too close to home for me right now. The oil embargo of 73. Following the Arab oil embargo in 73, we needed to save 10,000 barrels of oil daily. So Nixon signed the Emergency Daylight Saving Time Conservation Act in December of 73 for 2 years permanent daylight saving time, right? It started on January 6, 74, year-round, and majority of people were very, very for it, and it lasted 10 months because at the end, nobody liked it. And the biggest problem was complaints of jet black mornings forcing school kids to commute in total darkness. Yeah, and speaking as a school teacher even now, it was pretty dark out there, okay? But it only lasted a couple months. There would be 2 more changes. The first one was the 1986 Uniform Time Act. Now, candy makers were lobbying to change it to go after Halloween, but it didn't happen. The only thing they changed was the first Sunday in April, so it was extended earlier, but it still lasted to the last Sunday in October. Yeah.
Why did they, I wish they would push it back to April.
We'll get there, trust me, just trust me. We all do, yeah. Well, most of us do. We'll get there. The Energy Act of 2005, the candy makers actually successfully lobbied to extend Halloween into the first Sunday of November. So Halloween would be in, yeah? And it was for the safety of the trick-or-treaters. Remember that, okay? So come on in. You're fine. So the beginning now was the second Sunday in March to the first Sunday in November, and that's how it's still even today, okay? Daylight saving time, Arizona and Hawaii still opt out, except for the Navajo Nation, but also our territories, America, Samoa, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands do not use daylight saving time. And it has to do with the closer you get to the equator, the less important it becomes. Yeah. So what are the benefits of daylight saving time? It encourages outdoor activities like golf. It reduces traffic accidents. It actually has been proven to lower crime rates, about 7%, which is weird. It reduces seasonal depression. It is said to boost the economy by increasing evening activities. You're more likely to go shopping or go get gas or something in the evening. And okay, a slight reduction in energy use. The reason I put a question mark was that was probably true 100 years ago. Now with air conditioning, it's probably not, okay? So the first week, ooh, that's next week, kids. The first week, sleep deprivation, fatigue, and irritability. Been there, done that. More workplace injuries, increased fatal car accidents, heart attacks, strokes, and suicides, particularly in teenagers in Indiana. Really, yeah. On the other hand, delighted pets get to get fed 1 hour earlier. Our cats have atomic clocks, and they're, oh, nice, dinner's early. I don't know. Had to put that in there. And one other thing I didn't put on this, but it's recommended that you don't take important tests next week. Researchers have shown that SAT scores are significantly lower the first week after daylight saving time. Well,
That's when any school's doing this next week.
well, they're going to regret that. Yeah, they're next week. They shouldn't do that. What are the disadvantages? Darker mornings, transporting kids. Like I said, I taught school. I would be out there in pitch black, and I think Elkhart still picks up the little dinky doos like at 6:30 in the morning, and I was dodging kids. It scared me. Misaligned with the human circadian rhythm, linked to cardiovascular disease and obesity. So the next time the doctor complains about your weight, just tell them it's daylight saving time. Yeah. Higher cancer and inflammatory bowel disease rates, but it's particularly in the western areas. Guess where Elkhart is? It's interesting. And it also hurts primetime TV, drive-in movies, and theater attendance, and definitely, technically, higher energy use. So who loves it? The golf industry. And the whole sports industry in itself. Tourism, because amusement parks can stay open later. The barbecue industry, I didn't know there was such a thing, but they really, yeah, they love it because you're out there barbecuing, I guess. Retailers like it, as I said, because you can be out shopping later. And the candy manufacturers are finally happy with it. Who dislikes it? Farmers. I gotta get caught up here. Farmers have historically been the most vocal opponents. Their work is dictated by the sun, not a clock. For dairy farmers, cows don't follow the clock, making early milking difficult. Indeed, it stresses the cows. There's a 5 to 10% drop in milk production. Yeah. Grain farmers, well, they have to wait for the morning dew to evaporate before they can harvest, because otherwise it would be too wet. The airline and transportation, the Airport Transportation Association calls it expensive, confusing, and disruptive. And one estimate says it costs the industry $147 million every time the clock changes. Okay? Yeah, that's a lot. And also the media doesn't like it. Television ratings and drive-in theater attendance goes down. So, yeah. Okay, but why we're here is Indiana, right? Okay, and its time zones. During the Standard Time Act of 1918, the entire state was on Central. And in 1949, the state legislatures outlawed daylight saving time. So that started in 1949 for us. So interestingly, in 1961, the Interstate Commerce Commission actually divided Indiana in half between Eastern and Central, right? And I noticed though, I was in single digits, we'll leave it at that, but notice that St. Joe County is on Central at that point, okay? But there also, they say it was never uniformly observed, okay? So in 1967, the governor requested the entire state be moved to Central Time. The Department of Transportation moved the entire state to Eastern, except for 13 counties. And I think that 13th county was St. Joe County, next door to us. But on April 27, 1969, 12 counties stayed on Central, and everybody else was Eastern, okay? And still officially no daylight saving time. So, I have to, the little side note, this map, right? This map I downloaded from the Indiana State, and it's ironically called Indiana Time Zones, Check Before You Go. Yeah. But anyway, Mitch Daniels reinstated daylight saving time in 2006 and aligned us with New York, and a lot of people say that's why he wasn't reelected. We do not like our daylight saving time. But interestingly, the University of California actually did a study on daylight saving time in in Indiana, and it shows that daylight saving time costs Hoosiers $8.6 million a year in electricity bills. Okay. And it also helps to increase pollution emissions, and I'm not sure where it is. And as I said, the suicide rate for teenagers is higher. There is, I might add, a Central Time Coalition that was formed in 2009 that's trying to get Indiana back on Central Time. Okay. And I have to take, do you remember in 2006 when St. Joe petitioned to move over to Central Time? It was originally it was approved, but it was rescinded in January of 2006, and they had to stay on Eastern Time. So, yeah, we have a history of that. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention New Carlisle. New Carlisle is a little town in St. Joe County out at the west side. But their schools are all part of Rolling Prairie School District, which is in LaPorte County. And so the schools are all on Central Time. Okay, got that? So the town has to designate whether it's town time or school time, right? Can you imagine? I mean, it's a mess. And this is me. This is their town logo, and I really want to email them and say, now, is that school time or town time? If you want to know more about it, there's an article called Hoosiers Will Adjust Their Attitudes and Clocks by Ben Ned's College. It's really interesting once we found it, right? We were having a little hide and go seek with this. Okay, so, well, come on. Okay, so where is daylight saving time used? Worldwide, about 70 countries, or about 30% of the world uses it. North America and Europe primarily. It is not observed in USSR, Japan, India, most of Africa, or South America, although you can see the purple, it was at one time. Interestingly, China doesn't observe daylight saving time either, but China is so large, it should have 5 time zones. It has 1, and it's called China Standard Time. Okay, Sunshine Protection Act. I need to know, how many of you have heard of the Sunshine Protection Act? Wow, because you live with me. You heard me muttering about it. Yeah, okay. So I hadn't either, and I was like, what? There is legislation to make daylight savings time year-round, period. Amen. I see a no. Yeah.
They keep coming up with that.
Oh, yeah, they do. It was first proposed in 2018 by then Senator Marco Rubio. It failed to pass. It was reintroduced in 2019, 2020, and 21. Finally, in 2022, it did pass the U.S. Senate by unanimous consent, but it failed to advance otherwise. It's been reintroduced in 23, 24, and 25, but it remains in committee. So it's still kind of active. This is not the best chart, but it was the best one I could find. What if daylight saving time were made permanent? So if it were permanent, sunrises would be before 7 a.m. and sunsets after 5 p.m. If we get rid of daylight saving time, this is when the sunrise would be and the sunsets, right? Yes, ma'am.
So when you say if it was made permanent or if it was all year long, is that to say it would just be a permanent shift of an hour all year, or that there would be a gradual?
It would be one shift. In other words, when we change next week, we'll never change again. Yeah. Well, and let me show you a little bit more. Okay.
It's like if we would never have a sunrise. Wait a minute.
Oh, hang on.
Have a sunrise before 7?
Uh-huh. I got the. Give me a slide or two, and you'll see it. Sunshine Protection Act. Okay, so on the Sunshine Protection Act. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So the polls in 2025, about 48%, or just about half of us, want permanent standard time. That's what we're on right now. About 24% want permanent daylight saving time. 12% like changing the time twice a year, and 16% have no opinion. How can you know? Yeah. But this is, as of today, 20 states have passed legislation to have permanent daylight saving time, and they are the pink ones, although there's kind of an asterisk to it. Now, the Department of Transportation, who's now in charge of it, would have to approve. They have not. It's just kind of staying there. Arizona and Hawaii already have permanent standard time, as well as the U.S. territories. But while no new states have enacted permanent standard time, it is being considered. They are permanent standard time. California, Oregon, Washington, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Kentucky, Missouri. Now here is the weirdest one. It's also pending in Indiana. Now, did you guys know that we had a pending? No, I didn't either. But legislation for permanent standard time has been introduced in Indiana by Mark Messer. He was previously an Indiana state senator, but he's now in the U.S. House of Representatives, Republican 8th District around Jasper. And and supposedly this bill's in the Indiana legislation, but I sure haven't heard anything about it. So it gets interesting. This is the slide you want, Brenda. What would it look like if daylight saving time were made permanent in Indiana? If we stayed on daylight saving time, this is saying what the latest sunrise would be. And so we'd be pretty close to South Bend. The sun wouldn't rise till 9:12, which would be about 9:10 here in Elkhart. Yeah, we would be in darkness till after 9 o'clock in the morning. Yeah.
And what time of year would that be?
That would be winter. That would be your winters. Yeah. Your winter solstice. Yeah. Okay. So, spring forward, fall back. Don't forget to spring forward this Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.